Hey Hannah, so this is the video for my mock interview. Since this is for a job position, I'm doing it with an office background. So I guess I'll just kick off right now. Hello, my name is Keegan Wiggins. I'm a senior at Western Carolina University, which is roughly an hour southwest of Asheville, North Carolina. Um, I am a dual degree seeking student, so that means that when I graduate in May, I will have 2 degrees. So the first is in communication with a concentration in journalism, and the second is in international studies with a concentration in human rights and international law. Um, and then I also have a minor in leadership. Before I get started with the rest of the questions, I just want to thank you for this opportunity and the consideration that you're giving me for this position. So the first question is, why are you interested in becoming an NPR producer specifically? So basically, I really admire NPR as a news organization. I think they do an amazing job of remaining objective and uh, providing content that follows the Society of Professional Journalists Code of Ethics, which is something that is really important to me as a aspiring journalist. Um, so Yeah, essentially, I firmly believe that it's our duty as journalists to provide the public with objective and fair information, because once they have that objective information, then they can make the decisions that they need to in order to make a difference in society. And I feel that when we don't give people in the public correct or objective information, it can create a cause of events that negatively impact the society as a whole. So overall, I think NPR does a really good job of providing that information and following the code of ethics. For the next question, what qualifications do you already have that make you an ideal candidate for this position? So I know this is a position that focuses a lot on their podcast, All Things Considered. So when I was a sophomore, I did a podcast with 2 other students where we focused on discrimination issues on campus. At the time when we did the podcast, there had been a series of incidents on campus where there were discrimination against students that fit within different minorities or underrepresented groups. As a result, me and the 2 other students, we decided we were going to make a podcast that we called We Discriminate, since we're from Cullowhee. And we looked at 4 targeted groups on campus. So we reached out to LASSO, which is our Latin American student organization, and talked with a couple of representatives from that organization. We reached out to ICA, which is Intercultural Affairs. We also interviewed students from SAGA, which is our Sex and Gender Alliance. So a lot of those students identify within the LGBTQ plus community. And then we also interviewed international students. So for that project, I had to prepare our scripts. So a lot of the things that I prepared were I wrote the intros and the outros for each of our episodes so they were consistent. And then I also helped provide a lot of the transitions from when we would interview the students. Then I also hosted the interviews. So for the project, we split the work up pretty much evenly. So me and one student, we were both in charge of 2 of the organizations, doing the interview, getting the audio, and then the third student, he did a lot of the main work with the audio, and me and the other student, Marcus, we would sit and help Garrett with the audio. And then also that's where my help with editing some of the audio would come in. And from there, we made sure that our scripts all matched and the audio was consistent. And especially since we were interviewing multiple students for each podcast, we wanted to really make sure that we were differentiating who was saying what, and also making sure that that audio didn't exceed the volume of our own audio, just so that it was consistent and made it for a better experience for the audience when listening to our podcast. Okay, so for the next question, what do you believe is your biggest weakness? So going into this job in particular, I think my biggest weakness would have to be that I don't have that much experience with production and broadcasting. Um, Throughout college and with my internship with Transports Topics, which is a um, publication with the niche topic of the trucking industry in the US. Um, a lot of my content that I've published have been feature stories and have been written. I have done a couple of, like the podcast, and I've done videos and stuff, but, a lot of my content has been long stories, feature stories, preview stories. I've even done 24, or not 24, but stories on a deadline. So I had 12 hours to publish the story after an event. So again, I've had a wide variety of content that I've published, but again, most of that content has been long feature pieces. However, taking that into consideration, uh, I am a really fast learner and I pick things up really fast. So I don't think that, my lack of experience in production would really be detrimental to this job. I would pick up technology and the software that's used relatively fast. That was actually one of the comments that my supervisor, Gary from Transport Topics, said about me, and that he was very appreciative and really admired how quick I picked up all of their software, all of the technology that they used, the programs they used. They used a different type of publishing website than what my school's publication uses, so I had to learn the differences there. But overall, I will say, like, I would have to say my biggest weakness would have to be that I don't have that much experience with production. But again, I think I could easily overcome that. For the next question, what leadership qualities do you possess that would be useful in leading a team at NPR? So primarily as a student leader on campus, I love to lead by example. So with that being said, when I do things, especially with like open house, which I work for through Entourage, which is our um, tour guide job here on campus. I am our open house coordinator. So when we do open houses, um, I will make the list of assignments for everyone for the day, but then also I'll work throughout the day, essentially just checking in on people, making sure that there's no holes. Um, and a lot of my biggest work, I would say, comes when we do open house setup and when we clean up after. So that's when I really have to delegate a lot of work, because before that, I don't have those assigned positions for when we do setup. It's really whoever comes and helps out, they get to come help and set up. So when we do setup, I'll be asking people, hey, can you do this or can you do that? And while I do that, I also do a lot of the work too, because I don't believe in asking people to do work that I wouldn't do. So a lot of the times I'm asking people, hey, I'm coming to do this. Will you guys come help me? And then I'll say something like, hey, while we're doing this, would you guys mind doing that? That way I'm delegating work, but also working alongside a lot of the people. And then also, I strongly believe in servant leadership. So servant leadership, that is when you put others before yourself. And I've done this a lot through CAT Camp, which is like a week-long program that we do for incoming freshmen prior to the fall semester starting. And it's an opportunity for them to get to meet other freshmen, um, learn more about themselves and their leadership skills, as well as just, getting to adjust to college life before actually having to start classes and everything else that comes with college. And to that, as a counselor, I was definitely utilizing servant leadership because my campers came first. Just as much as CAT Camp is an emotional experience every time you do it, my campers and how they were emotionally coping with CAT Camp came before how I was coping with it. Because again, I'd done it before and I knew what to expect. So, my priority was my campers and making sure they got the most out of their CAT Camp experience, just like I did when I was a freshman and in their shoes. And then lastly, I've taken the Strength Finders tests. So I've gotten my top five um, leadership skills, and one of my top ones was restorative. And so the restorative strength is where you are basically adept at problem solving. So you can identify problems that are happening. So it could be a problem in the office or between a couple of coworkers. I could identify that. It could be a problem with some of the programming or something like that. I could identify it and find solutions for it, or create like a common ground so that it can be resolved. And so that would be another one of my leadership skills that I think would be really beneficial to the organization. And for the last question, do I have any knowledge in production and broadcasting? So like I said earlier, my experience in production and broadcasting is a bit limited, essentially because my concentration for communication is in journalism and not broadcasting. But despite that, I have done a variety of work in journalism that does include production and broadcasting, primarily with the podcast that I did my sophomore year, but also when I did content for Transport Topics, my internship. I got to sit in on a couple of their podcast, not like interviews, but a lot of their meetings where they strategized for their upcoming podcast. They also had me sit in on their current podcasts, and I would run things like the teleprompter, or I would help organize a lot of their prompts for them, or just kind of help manage content any way that I could. And then also with Transports Topics, I helped cover a lot of the content around the National Truck Driving Championships, which is basically like the Olympics for truck drivers. But I did a lot of the photo stories for them. I covered feature pieces on truck drivers that won within their states. And I also helped collect data for the statistics on who won in what state, what categories they won in, and I'm basically did a lot of the content management for that. And on the flip side, with all of the work that I've done with the Western Carolina Journalist, which is our online publication at school, I've had to make a lot of editorial decisions with that publication. So I am currently the editor-in-chief for WCJ. So that means I do make a lot of the editorial decisions. So I decide if a story or the content that a reporter puts up is publishable. I typically have the last say. I'll have say where it goes on our website. So I get to say if it's prominent enough to go under our featured page. So when you open up our website, that's the first thing you see. Or I can be like, okay, no, it's just campus news. It can go towards the bottom. Or, I can even be like, this is not publishable. It needs more content. So, and then I do have a lot of say in what gets published and what doesn't get published. Also, besides making those editorial decisions, I do a lot of editorial work behind the scenes. So that means I come up with story ideas, which then I send out to all of our reporters like, hey, this would be a good opportunity for a story. Can someone cover this? Especially if I can't cover that story, because there's definitely going to be times where I can't go to every story. And then I'll also control our content on the website. So I have to make sure that all of our social media is linked to our website. Currently, I'm working on linking our Instagram to our website and working on the bugs with our Twitter. And then also sometimes we'll have coding issues. So students will do videos to go alongside a story. And the most common issue we have with that is a lot of students struggle with embedding that video onto the WordPress website. So I'll have to go in, and usually I have to fix little bugs. I mean, it's not a hard thing to fix, but it's just something that people tend to struggle with. So as an editor, before I publish it, I always make sure that the video is seeable to the public, and that that bug that is typically like usually it's just one letter's off or something with the embed codes, that I have to go fix it. But generally, I do a lot of editorial work for the Western Carolina Journalist. So So even though I don't have that much experience with the production and broadcasting part, I definitely make up for that with my written ability and making editorial decisions, finding stories, um, and essentially, the basics of what it means to be a reporter. I have experience in that area. Um, so those were all of the questions. So I just want to thank you again for your time and your consideration, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you. All right.